So many of the NBA star players are in a very interesting position as the league is transitioning from the old CBA to the new, and this season we're seeing a lot of stars not necessarily have the trade value, even though they do have value to a team. And in this segment, we're going to hear from a few different players as they're starting to wake up to the fact that the new CBA has decreased a lot of players' values unless you're on a Luka, Jokic, or LeBron James kind of status. Teams that either had signed guys under the old CBA like Anthony Davis, Ja Morant, Zach LaVine, LaMelo Ball, Sabonis out in Sacramento, the guys that make anywhere from 40 million to about 50 million to 60, like Karl Anthony Towns, to put them on the trade block nowadays, it's going to be very difficult to move them. And sometimes it might appear that they actually have no market, is that teams are either in the middle of rebuilding or they're already competitive and have too many players hitting their cap. It just makes things very difficult for teams where it's clearly obvious that they need to move into a new direction. And that's where we see the Charlotte Hornets kind of stuck this season. Same thing for the Memphis Grizzlies, the Sacramento Kings, and even to a degree, the Atlanta Hawks with Trae Young. And in the midst of all that clusterfuck at the same time, there are guys that do have value, but they're struggling to gain it in the open market in free agency. Guys like Julius Randle, we've seen him take a pay cut. He's actually making less money than he made before. He's hovering around $30 million a year, which is less than Emmanuel Quickly. Same thing for Brandon Ingram out in Toronto. He had to take virtually the same salary he was making on his rookie scale max. Even Norman Powell got screwed over from performing well last season. Basically, he was an all-star on the Clippers, but because teams didn't really want to get caught up with having him in a long-term deal or just even a 3-year deal at $30 million to $40 million a year, it just created this no man's land for him where he ended up in Miami for about $20 million a year. And speaking of Miami, even Jimmy Butler got caught up in this situation, but lucky for him, the Golden State Warriors are trying to maximize Stephen Curry's final years. So he was able to secure a $100 million deal, but he had to go through a back and forth with Pat Riley, which lucky for him, the only reason he got out of it is because of that player policy, that player rest policy in which the Heat got caught up in, and that really ended up tying the Heat's hands as they were in violation of just resting their stars for no reason. But a lot of these things are results from the previous era, the player movement era, where we see Kevin Durant sign a brand new contract in Brooklyn, then ask for a trade. Anthony Davis with the Pelicans just forcing a trade to LA out of nowhere, even though he was still under contract. And many others, James Harden with Philly and also with the Brooklyn Nets. So the NBA owners were put on notice with this player movement, and they slowly have crafted this new CBA in which guys can definitely have access to more money, but them hitting free agency and having owners on where they go, those options look a lot different today. Even the 65 game rule, which is a team rule that only gets voted by the owners, not the players union, is technically tied to their contracts, especially for the Supermax guys, because once you hit over that 65 game threshold, these guys can actually qualify for the all NBA teams and certain awards, which will trigger certain price points in their next contract re-ups. You could look no further than Tyrese Halliburton in 2024. The fact that he was willing to play injured and risk further damage possibly to his career in order to hit that 65 game threshold to qualify for that Supermax contract that he got. These billionaire owners did not get to their position by just playing nice. But first, let's take a listen to Brian Windhorst as he admits the truth of how these star players entering into this new CBA, there's going to be less of them that actually qualify for a Supermax.
By the way, I had an executive tell me the other day, with the new CBA, there's really only 10 max players in this league.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, there's certainly circumstantial max.
Right.
Like, no offense to Paul George in Philly.
Right.
I mean, I think that's kind of a circumstantial based on the based on everything.
Now going back to the Tyrese Halliburton situation with him playing injured on his way to getting a Supermax, he had to risk himself because of that 65 game rule. So there's technically going to be less than 10 guys that are going to be eligible for that Supermax going forward. So this works to the owner's favor. And you could look at another situation more recently in Jalen Williams in OKC. He signed a Supermax rookie extension, but the fact that he started off this season And he's missed enough games now where he doesn't qualify to make an all-NBA team or even win certain awards. So OKC over the next 5 seasons will pay him $241 million instead of potentially paying him up to $289 million. And that does save them a significant amount of money because right now they have a pending $210 million luxury tax bill. So with the Oklahoma City Thunder in prime position to be a dynasty, we're going to see how these small market teams react with that type of luxury tax bill that's coming their way. It should come by no surprise, in the past few seasons, we have seen nowhere near any kind of dynasties being in the league, and it's not set up that way going forward. And Draymond Green right here gives great insight to this.
The Celtics, listen, this is all about the second apron. People said they didn't want super teams anymore. Well, here you have it. All these moves are being made to dodge that second apron. For those out there that don't know what the second apron is, in layman's term for you, it's a hard cap. It is a hard cap that no owner is dealing with because the penalties are crazy. You lose draft picks, you lose the mid-level exception, you lose roster spots, you lose the ability to get better and compete as a team.
You also lose draft picks 7 years out, depending how many years in a row you stay in that second apron, which is crazy.
And the amount of money that you lose is insanity. And so the Boston Celtics would have had a salary cap with luxury tax bill of $540 million. It is now at $280 because they got rid of those contracts. So for those that don't understand what the second apron is, as basic as I can put it for you, it is a hard cap. And when I said this before the deal was signed, that this is ridiculous and it's going to hurt players in the end. No one wanted to listen and everybody wanted to act like the PA was making a great deal.
Facts. CJ McCollum and Andre Iguodala, I don't know if they can't get the players to all be in one accord, but maybe this is possibly the best deal that they can strike under the conditions that they were in. And as of right now, it looks like this new current structure really benefits the high-ranking role players. Maybe the guys that are the third or fourth best player on the team, and their contract rates are going up season by season. But the guys that are in the Jimmy Butler slots, the Julius Randles, the Norman Powells, the Brandon Ingrams, they're getting fucked over. Even though they put up consistent scoring and solidify themselves in that co-star role. The co-stars in today's NBA, their contract price is going up and up and up. That's really what's under the biggest threat.
Made a shit deal, as the PA has done for years now, and every year the pot gets bigger and the business gets better and the players get screwed more. That's just how this business works then. And so, in saying that, back to the Boston Celtics, that's what all of these moves are about, people. That's why they got rid of Porzingis. That's why they got rid of Jrue Holiday. That's why you're hearing so many people call on Jaylen Brown. You're hearing so many people call on Derek White. It's because they know they want to get away from that second apron tax.
And it also shows you that the league right now, the way it's structured, there's a very thin line from winning a championship to rebuilding. As Draymond Green stated here, the Boston Celtics is one prime example of that. And another one is the Dallas Mavericks coming off that NBA Finals appearance. All of a sudden, they're picking in next year's draft with the first overall pick. That's really not by accident. See, Mark Cuban, who he sold the team to, he understood that this was a major possibility because even he was ducking the fact that the Dallas Mavericks would owe Luka Doncic a brand new contract, $345 million for 5 years. That's almost $70 million a year. And even before that contract was about to come up, the Dallas Mavericks were already paying into the luxury tax. They were paying about $5 million, and that payment was about to balloon to about $100 million because remember, Kyrie Irving's contract was also up, and they had a few other players coming off the books that they would have to figure out. It sounds small, kind of figuring out what kind of role players you're going to get for a team like that, but you could look no further than the Phoenix Suns. Them even re-signing Grayson Allen when they had Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. They almost spent $75 million a year on just Grayson Allen when they gave him an extension. This is when you factor in the luxury tax that they were paying. So we're starting to see how the new CBA really strangleholds teams, even though they have owners who were once willing to spend money under the old rules.
And Jason Tatum being out, things are up in the air. You trade for Anthony Simons. I think, listen, they're the Boston Celtics. They got to be competitive, but at the end of the day, it's an expiring deal, cap situation, all of those
They
things.
can recalibrate. Yeah.
And you got Jason Tatum hurt, right? So if I had to guess, Jaylen Brown, if he have any nicks and knacks this year, probably won't be in the lineup because you're going to recalibrate. You're going to let your books settle. And then next year with Jason Tatum coming back, then you try to retool and start going for it again. And that's just how these things work. You'll see this all over the NBA for years to come because that's just the way this CBA works. And so you'll see this happen over and over again.
Yeah,
That's my spiel. That's the second apron.
And again, we're seeing multiple bubbles this season that's coming out of this brand new CBA, which is Anthony Davis, LaMelo Ball, Ja Morant, even LeBron James to a degree. I'm going to toss Trae Young name in there also. But even if these teams wanted to trade these players, there's barely any market for another team to absorb these contracts. It's kind of crazy, but it makes sense why the Minnesota Timberwolves were reluctant to give Julius Randle an extension for $40 million plus a year. Same thing for the Toronto Raptors or just any team when Brandon Ingram and Rich Paul were trying to get him somewhere. Even Pat Riley with Jimmy Butler. These guys are significant to their teams, but we're seeing a pushback because a lot of franchises don't want to get caught up with trying to get rid of a LaMelo Ball making $40 million a year plus. A Ja Morant, same thing. A Zach LaVine, Sabonis, even Zion Williamson. All these teams clearly understand that they have to go into a brand new direction, but it's hard to pivot because of those salaries. That's why I stated in this new NBA, you either got to be Luka, LeBron, Jokic, SGA, or you're basically better off being a Norman Powell versus being a Julius Randle or any kind of co-star. The only co-star that kind of lucked up was Paul George, and that was by accident. The 76ers were desperate. They lost James Harden. Daryl Morey scrambling to figure something out, and Paul George was sort of the bailout plan. So that's how he lucked up and got that kind of max deal in free agency. But ask yourself this, who was the last free agent other than Paul George in the last several years? I would say the last 4 to 5 seasons to just get a large deal off of free agency. These are very interesting times, but this is not a mistake. The owners set it up this way. They understood the outcomes. Again, these are billionaire owners with teams and just teams of lawyers who understand years of contract language and just creating a whole ecosystem around that language. And this is how we see the new CBA playing out. The guys who really make the franchises worth a lot of money, the guys at the very tippy top, they're set up to get paid, even making $100 million by the end of this deal. And this is where we're going to hear from Andre Iguodala and Kyrie Irving as they spoke on the importance of some of the top players to the evaluations of these franchises. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
You only get blamed for something that someone doesn't like, but you never get credit for, we have the highest minimum wage in the world, right? Yeah. We have the highest middle class in the world. Like, what's our middle class now? Like the average salary is like 14 million. That's the middle class. A low is what, 900,000? Mm-hmm. I mean, you make $1 million as minimum wage in the league, and then on the high end, they just signed for 70 and then a year. Book just signed,
breaking records.
And so when you those type of things, and we're not looking credit for it. We're just trying to make sure it's like, okay, how do we help grow the business? Mm-hmm. So they don't understand, like, certain sacrifices being made all the way around. Yeah. Like, Bron, Steph, those guys, like you guys, like you actually, I don't know if I can say this as a quote unquote union guy, because I'm the executive director of the NBPA. Mm-hmm. But I read a lot of different articles, and there was one article that could argue you got 8 guys that push the needle for all NBA fans to follow and watch all their own individual teams, other players.
Stat.
It's crazy.
It's a crazy stat.
One could argue, I'm not arguing this, but one could argue
Let me argue with him.
A Bron or Steph is worth $350 million a year.
Yes.
I'm not arguing that.
No. That's why I said let me argue it. You're not saying it, but I am, because based off of there isn't a quantifiable number for cultural impact.
Correct.
And
It's in the bees.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. If we're talking value there, that's what we're driving as an engine, right? And sometimes as a passenger, we play our role very well as NBA players to participate in what's asked of us, but also the piqued interest from the room shakers that are around our business is pretty interesting, because you realize that not only are a lot of people fans of us as players, but they want to get to know us as people. They want to know what's going on in those thoughts of yours, what makes you great on the court, and how does your brain process decision making. You know, you've had how many classic album years where you could look at that year and be like, yo, I could pretty much argue I was a top 15, top 20 player in the league.
Sure.
If you have a certain amount of those and you've pushed the needle for the business to grow, your jersey sales are up there, you're not necessarily getting followers on social media, but your engagement with your community is people are showing up to games to specifically see you.
Yep.
There is no, I'm trying to cheer for you on the team, or so there's a balance of what is individual raise of that impact score, and then what is the team raise, franchise raise, which also includes that player and other executive leadership, which helps local community outreach, you know, international, global community outreach, where it is a broader scale and there are leaders within that room where they are responsible for pushing that needle too. The franchise hires great people, financial, institutional guys, and, you know, girls. And then us on the pro side of the players, we're now gearing up for a new generation where their business interests are also tied into their talent. They want to be rewarded for the value.
Yes.
Now, with this new CBA, the NBA owners found a way to separate the guys at the very tippy top from even the co-stars. There's a major gap from players even cashing in from that value. Luka, Jokic, SGA, these guys are going to be making 70 all the way up into $100 million a year come 2028, 2029. But the co-stars, the guys that are the top 15 to 20 to 30 players in the league, for them to cash in on that value, they're not seeing a market. And that's really one of the major issues. We're seeing the same set of guys that were able to cash in under the old rules, like Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Zach LaVine, Ja Morant. And now under the current landscape, we could see the interest from other teams when it hits that these guys will potentially hit the open market. It's almost non-existent. Even the Chicago Bulls most recently have stated that they will give up none of their young core for Anthony Davis. That right there is a big fucking difference in the way that co-stars are being assessed.
When I leave the house, I was born in Australia. My family comes from the Bronx. My family comes from North Dakota, South Dakota. I have family in, you know, Seattle, Washington. I have family in Florida. I represent this broader community that watches the NBA.
Yep.
You know, so, you know, we can't see it all the time, but I know we feel it, and you're behind the scenes doing your thing, and I've seen it as well.
And now things like this are so noticeable that even former players are starting to say something about it. Richard Jefferson and Kendrick Perkins dropped major gems on how this second apron is impacting the league. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Players have been chirping about the second apron, and it seems like if you guys are not a huge fan of this particular part of the new CBA. Miles Turner said it's either you're getting max big-ass contracts or you're getting minimum.
Like
Lance
they
Jr.,
said was going to happen.
Everybody but the stars are getting kind of fucked. Norman Powell, I feel like if the apron wasn't there, I would have gotten an extension instead of being traded here. Tyus Jones said there was just less money when it was time for him to sign his contract.
Tyus Jones need to stop worrying about that.
Can y'all explain what the second apron rule is and why it affects?
It doesn't allow you the flexibility. If you're in that apron multiple times, the level of the tax penalty is exponential. It can affect your draft picks. It's all of these things. So it is basically essentially a hard cap. And what I'm saying is when you start hearing players talk like this at the beginnings of a new CBA deal, you know what's going to happen at the end of that CBA deal. You know what's going to happen. Owners eventually would love to get it to NFL. Everybody else wants baseball. We want it to say we've always fought to allow for an open market, because why is it that a player should be capped? in any other market in the world. Yes, there's a competitive space, but if an owner's willing to pay for someone, if I work for Google, they can pay me as much as I want, whatever my market value is. If I work for Apple, they can pay me whatever my market value is, whatever they believe that they can pay me. In basketball and certain sports, they cap it. That's what this is. So right now, we're in a position where it's like when you start to hear multiple players say this, and it's just the beginning of this CBA, that means when we get to the end of it, there's most likely going to be something that has happened in the 90s and the 2000s. There's most likely going to be, there's going to be something that happened. Shout out the WNBA. They know what we're talking about. There's going to be something that happened. People have said this was a bad deal for the players since the onset. They have been screaming that. Sadly, the people that were saying it was bad was after they agreed to it.
And one of the reasons why it seems like there was two different camps within the players union is because it's hard for the reps to get everyone to come together. You could just look at the player union reps per team. It's usually a guy that's on the fringe of just being in the G League and being in the NBA. That's how nonchalant the players really are when it comes to that. And the turnover rate in the NBA outside of the stars is so high that they can't even keep certain guys' interest long enough because, again, it's just a rotational door of players. The owners know this. They use this to their advantage when they're drawing up these deals.
How did we get here?
They signed a deal.
No, it was before the fucking deal.
Don't do that. Don't do it. Don't do it.
He was going to say players were holding out and moving and
don't do it.
Yep, Kendrick is right about that. The Anthony Davis leaving New Orleans, Kevin Durant leaving Brooklyn right after you signed the extension. Like, it's too many guys moving left and right, and make no mistake about it, the owners were definitely peeping this. They were losing a lot of money. How many jerseys were on sale after guys were just kind of traded away because they forced their way out? A lot of money was lost. Owners couldn't really project the future of their business because they were not guaranteed to have their stars long term, and they've adjusted.
You know, guys teaming up, jumping fence, going this, and it started.
I just said that.
That's not why.
Why is it, Richard?
That's not
why.
Why? The teams did not say to come together, we got to stop this. That's not what the teams came together. The teams came together so that they could maximize the cap, so teams weren't overspending. They did not do it to prevent the players from doing something. It's about money. The owners don't care about it from that level. They care about the dollar, period.
Facts. And that part right there is not discussed enough when it comes to Luka being traded to the Lakers. Again, Patrick Dumont and the Adelson family had a pending luxury tax bill of over $100 million for the next, 5-10 years. As long as they kept Luka, they were guaranteed to at least be paying, at minimum, $100 million in luxury tax. Mark Cuban already knew this. That's why him selling the team was almost perfect timing. He sold it right before he got into extension talks with Luka. Kyrie was also pending on a brand new extension. They had a couple role players coming off the books. And for Luka to hit their cap sheet for $70 million a year, that was going to put them into the luxury tax, whether this team was going to be competing for a championship or not.
Any excuse that they say woven in there, the owners are billionaires, multi-billionaires. Do you think they care about fairness?
Hey, RJ's right. They do not care about fairness. And going back to Patrick Dumont, just because he spent $3.5 billion on the Mavericks doesn't mean he's necessarily there for the Mavericks. His family's very politically connected and they're there for the casino. The same way Steve Ballmer, he's not necessarily in LA for the Clippers. He was there for the Intuit Dome and most importantly to secure the land ownership in downtown LA by USC. The Clippers was only a vessel to it. The same way the Dallas Mavericks are the vessel for the Adelson family to use their political connections to open up gambling in Texas.
Yeah.
What billionaire has ever cared about fairness?
Can I say this?
We have a Ballmer.
The same motherfucking billionaire that got mad at Braun and wrote a fucking letter about him.
Yes,
right? Like, that's
and begged them to come back.
So
Thank you, Jesus. We made billions when he came back.
He made billions, period.
I understand
All
that.
I'm saying is you said what billionaire care about fairness?
That wasn't fair.
Obviously, he got
that wasn't fairness. That wasn't.
He got this feeling.
But he was complaining. He was complaining about a lack of fairness. That's what they say because they did it within the cap rules.
These owners, when it comes to business, there is no emotion. And the slickest card in the playbook has always been that 65-game rule. I love the way Adam Silver kind of introduced it. He tried to soften it up by saying the owners were in a meeting about it and they involved the players union. When in reality, that 65-game rule, because it was a team rule, only the owners could vote on it. And that was not only the guarantee that stars would play in some of these nationally televised games, but also that owners could have an out when it comes to their supermax contracts. But we'll see. In due time, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be stuck in limbo because they can't get rid of certain stars that they paid, aka the Charlotte Hornets and LaMelo Ball, Zach LaVine in Sacramento, and even to a degree, Anthony Davis with the Dallas Mavericks. It's going to be hard to get rid of AD because he signed that supermax deal under the old CBA. And when you look at guys who had the same circumstance around those times that got that convenient max, Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns in Minnesota, those days are over. So whoever is left remaining under those same contracts, they're basically untradeable nowadays. But we'll see how it plays out. You guys definitely hit up the link in the description below. Check out my NBA True Story playlist. Also the NBA Hardwood Nuances. Got a lot of game film in there mixed in with the storytelling. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.